Sweet. All right. Can you hear me? So, has anybody been looking at the videos I've been posting online? Okay. Okay. And are they helpful or are they? Okay, good. So, as long as people are getting some use out of it, then it's all worthwhile to do.
It's very helpful.
Excellent. So, I'm hoping I can become a YouTube sensation here sooner or later.
Your video buffered and I thought you got monetized.
It did?
No, it buffered and I thought it was monetization. But
I don't know. Can I don't know who'd be advertising for me.
That's what I was thinking.
Some redneck thing with the sound of my voice. Okay. Well, I want to talk a little bit about game engines before we jump into it, because like I said, the discussions that we've been having, these really kind of fit into the general. You're not hearing me at all? Let's see. Do I have to turn it off? Okay. Let me show.
Alright, now try.
Can you hear me now?
No, is it? Did you turn off the voice?
No, show it off. Power's on. Gentle as possible.
Make sure they're on the same frequency.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, that's 1, 2, 3. So I can go to the slides where yeah, let me, I'll do that for you. So, yeah. So I just want to say, I wanted to kind of talk about just how game engines work a little bit. Like I said, we've been diving into this. So, like I said, right now you're using Unity, but if you're going to use Unreal or any other game engine that kind of comes down the pipe, it's really going to follow this same structure to it. So, in any game engine, it's essentially, so a game engine is really just a giant program. And what you're doing is you're starting your game, and then you're entering this main loop. And so we didn't really talk much about programming loops, but really for programming, there's multiple ways that you can have your program loop over a set of instructions multiple times. You can identify conditions when to break out of that. So you can count a number of times that you want to have the code loop, or another way to do it as well is to say, while this set of conditions is true, then keep looping over this particular code. And really that's what a game engine is doing, is that we just have this one giant while loop that's running, and we're saying it's while we're still playing, so while the game's not over, there's these certain things I want to transpire. And so for game engines, it ends up being basically the same 3 components. So one is your player input. So you want to know what the player is doing at any particular time. So are they pressing a key? Are they pushing anything on their joystick? Anything like that. And then that feeds into this logic update. And so logic update ends up encompassing a large portion of what's happening in the game. So anything that has to do with physics, anything that has to do with just doing some type of updates to the UI. All that's happening within this update. And so we've already had some experience with this in our code, because now we're talking about these update callbacks that we have in Unity, this update and fixed update. And so any model behavior within Unity that has either of those methods, those are going to get called while whenever this logic update happens. And so once we've updated the state of the world, then we need to figure out what we're going to render to the screen in that frame. So that comes down to the rendering portion. So probably either next week or in 2 weeks, we'll talk about how we actually render graphics to a computer screen. So that's where the rendering takes place, and that's in a sense the output. So you can see what's happening in the game, and then we come back and we loop and we do it all over again. So this happens as long as the game is being played, and then once the game's over, we can shut it down and exit out. So when we say game engine, it's really, you're talking about this sophisticated piece of software that we're reusing portions of it in order to build the type of game that we want to construct. And so it's not, we use engine because it's, I guess, it has some similarity to, say, a car engine, where this is what's powering it to get it to go. Unless you're really into car engines, you don't necessarily understand how it all works. You just kind of know, I press these buttons and I do these things, and then the car moves. And likewise, the game engine, you don't necessarily need to understand fully, how is Unity calculating collisions between objects? How is it reading input? All that's just happening behind the scenes. You're just being notified of when events happen. So you can say, hey, did somebody press a button? Or you can call back and say, hey, these two objects collided, or hey, we're updating the frame, or we're now updating the frame. So all those are happening independent of your game. And so really the game application kind of sits on top of the engine. So all the scripts that we're writing, and also how we're tying the different game components together, and that's creating our game application. So it's outside of, so we don't have to modify the engine at all. We're just, we're using what's coming out of the engine to then set up our game application. And then we can, as the game application runs, that then provides input for the game engine to figure out how to update things, or what it needs to update, or how the world's going to change for the player. And so these are kind of a number of the components that go into the game engine. So you already have experience now with input handling, and you also have a little bit with collision detection. So with the ground check, that's huge. Then also as your character runs around and runs into things, that's part of the collision detection. You're gaining some experience with physics. Like I said, but the list kind of goes on and on. And you'll get to experience most of these. I'm not going to touch networking at all. But you'll get to play with UI components, animation. And so every game engine has kind of grab bag of features that you can tie into in order to make your game. So I think that's all I want to talk about for that part today, because I want to get into some of the programming constructs that we're using within Unity, but I'll save that for Thursday. So really what I want to do now is kind of go back to the game and start diving a little bit more into the assignment and finishing up some of the things we want to do for the assignment. So really I think the last part that we have with regards to assignments is getting the character to do a double jump. And so I want to come back to my character control. Well, let me come back to my character. We'll go ahead and, okay, I have the script open. And so if I go back and review kind of how the jump works. And so in the jump, what we're doing is we're checking to see if the player is pressing the get button down, or if they're pressing the jump button, which we tied to the space bar. And we're also on the ground. So if we're up in the air, so the way this is set now, if you're up in the air and you press the space bar again, that should prevent you from jumping. So right, like I said, so right now it's just set for a single jump. And so, the way that we want to set this up is now we want to have multiple jumps. So as you're in the air, you should have the ability to hit the space bar again and kind of launch yourself, get even further into the sky. But we want to limit it to kind of a finite number of presses. And so to start it off, so I've set up a private variable, and so so does anybody remember when I define something as private, what does that mean in the context of the script?
Yes, access from inside the script.
Right. So so it's the only place you can access that variable is just within the script. So outside scripts cannot access that. Whereas anything that's deemed public, an external script would be able to access it. So this jump count's a private, and I identify it as an integer. So an integer just means a whole number. So we don't have fractions of a jump. It's only going to be one jump or two jumps, things like that. So the way that this is going to work is that every time we press the space bar, or every time we jump, we want to count how many times we're doing that. And then we want to set it up such that once we hit a particular limit, then we stop jumping. And so one thing we can do is we can set the limit such that it's something that you can modify in the editor. So if you wanted to have double jump or triple jump or something like that, you would have the ability to do it. So this is a little different. So even though these are identified as private, we still have the ability to edit them within, or you're able to see them within the editor because it has this tag associated with it, this serialized field. But just for the sake of simplicity, I'm just going to name this public int, and I'm going to call it, say, maximum jump count. And I'll default it to 2. But I'm going to set this, so this is going to be the limit I'm going to check to see how many times the spacebar has been pressed. And if jump count is equal to or greater than this value, then I'm going to cut off the jumping, because I only want that to happen a certain number of times. And so I can see, I think I've set this up. So if you're in Visual Studio, you can actually do final references so you can see where all you've called it. I just wanted to check to see if I had called this in multiple places. So all I've done so far to get this set up is I do initialize it to 0. So whenever the character is now back on the ground, I reset jump count to 0. So once the character is in the air, that's when, once we register that the jump has happened, I want to increment jump count, and then I said, but put a limit on it such that we're not going above and beyond the maximum limit. So in the move, so like I said, the move here, we're passing the values. So this float move, really this only ends up being, in our case, 1 or -1. So are we moving to the right or to the left? And then jump is a Boolean value. So is my character, has the user pressed the space bar or not? If I come down here, so if the player should jump. So right now it's saying if the player's on the ground and we're jumping, then we want to do this. But now we're in this, so now we have a different condition. So this is going to get into some conditional statements that we haven't really kind of described a whole lot. So a conditional is an if statement. So we call it, it's colloquially an if statement, but and given that we put the word if in front of it. But what this is it looks to see if this statement is true. And if it's true, then you execute the code that's in there. And if it's not true, then you skip this line of code. So if we're on the ground and we press the space bar, then we want to jump. And so in this case, we say grounded is false, and we have the force. But now we have this new condition where we're in the air, and we want to see if we can still do another jump. So in this case, can we still do a double jump? And so let's add another condition. So I'll say else if. And so I could say, so else is really just, it identifies that there could be, that in the case this is not true, I want you to do this. But an else if, it says, okay, if this isn't true, then check to see if this condition is true. And if that, and you can have several else if statements within a one single kind of conditional. But here I'm going to say else if. I'm going to put my brackets. So what are the conditions I want? I want to know the character's in the air, and we have not exceeded the jump count.
How do you put those brackets?
So that's just the curly brace key. Okay. So which variable are we using for tracking whether or not the player's on the ground? I think I've heard mumbles of M grounded. I'm going to say so. So so if I put this exclamation point, so this exclamation point really means to take the inverse of that Boolean statement. So you can see up here, if we're on the ground, so if grounded is true and we're jumping, so both those are true, then we do this. Now I want to say, if we're in the air, so M grounded here would be false, but if I put this exclamation point, that means to really take the inverse value of that. So if that is set to, it's really to make that true. It's the same if I were to do something like this. If I said M grounded equal to false. And so with conditional statements, if you're checking for equivalence, you use this equal equal. And it's to disambiguate between, say, something like this, which is it's trying to set a variable equal to a particular value. And this is checking for equivalence. So I'm just going to leave it like this just for the sake of clarity for those who haven't done much programming. So if we know that this is, so if M grounded is false, meaning that we're in the air, and we want to know that our jump counter hasn't exceeded the jump count value, the maximum value that we specified. So if m jump count, if that is less than this maximum jump count, so if both these statements are true, then we want to go ahead and keep jumping. And so, like I said, the way that we do a jump, it's really we're just adding, we're adding a force in the y direction for the character. So I'm just going to do that again. I just copy and paste that line. So we're adding it. And then another thing that we need to do, so we need to add, because every time we do a jump that we're counting as to our jump count, we need to increment that variable. So I'm going to say increment our jump counter. I'm going to say m jump count, and you can do it one of two ways. So the longhand way would be something like this. So we're saying m jump count to itself plus 1. So that increments the variable by 1. If you want to do it the shorthand way, it'd be m jump count, and you do this plus equal 1. And so what that means is you're adding something, you're adding a value to the variable, which in this case is 1. So I'm going to remove that line, because if we kept both of them, then we'd be adding 2. We just want to add 1. So here, and then I'm going to copy these 2 lines, because I said we're registering this as a valid jump. And so another thing that we could do, just kind of verify. So, well, actually, let me just go ahead and save this. So now I'm going to come back to Unity. Let's see. Okay, so it's now built. You can see now we have this maximum jump count as a value that we can modify. So it's a public. Now we have it as a value in the editor. Right now we'll just leave it at 2. So kind of show you all something interesting. So as you're working on your code, you may want to just be able to keep an eye on different variables that you have. So as the script's running, you want to ensure that things are being set correctly. So there's a couple ways you can do it. If you want to do it directly through the editor, you come up to Inspector and you right-click and click on Debug. And what Debug does is now any private member variable that you have is now shown in the editor. It's just grayed out because you're not allowed to actually modify it. So you can see our jump count is now seen in here. So as I'm pressing the space bar, I should see this increment. And then it should stop incrementing when it gets to the maximum. So it should never be greater than its maximum jump count 2. And so we can play. So hopefully, we should be able to visually see that that's the case. But then we can also look and make sure that that's also happening here in the editor. So go ahead and run that. Now if I press, whoa, you see it's flying off the handle. So let's see. So we're kind of automatically doing the double jump, which isn't quite what we want. So let's take a look at what may be happening in code that's preventing that from happening. So if you remember, so this hasn't changed. So, so here's another thing that we need to change. So if you remember here in jump, we only should be registering jump when we press the button and we're on the ground. However, because we're doing a double jump, now we can, in effect, remove that because we now set that up within the script. So I'm going to remove that. Let's try this again. So we're still flying through the air. So not quite what we're looking for here. So let's go back and just kind of verify that we have things set up the way that we want. So here, from grounded and jumping. So another thing too. So here's the here's the problem. So in here, we say if we're grounded and we're pressing the jump button, that's the only time this should be called. Here we're saying we're not on the ground. The jump count is less than maximum jump, but we still need to see that the player is pressing the jump button. So I need to add in one more and. So now, if we're in the air and we're pressing the jump button, and this count has not exceeded the max, then call that. So, does that explain why, or can folks kind of see why we were getting the result that we were having previously? Maybe?
I guess I don't understand why the jump count was going to 2 instead of just 1.
Okay, so why the jump count was going to 2? It dealt with, I didn't have this. And so if I walk through the code, so if I were to walk through it, so if we're on the ground and I press the jump button, then this code should be called, right? So in this case, we jump up and we're in the air. And so because of that, this gets called and then we just end the statement. So we skip the rest of this stuff. So now that, say we're in the air, so I press the jump button, the character's now in the air. And so we're in this update. It's saying, so both of these should be false because I'm no longer on the ground, but I'm also not pressing the jump button. So both these are false, they should be skipped. So it goes to this line. So it says, are you in the air? Yes. Is the jump count less than its maximum jump count? Yes. But right now it's ignoring whether or not I'm pressing the jump button or not. And that's why I just immediately went to 2. So now if I put that line in there, so now it should only run this if we're pressing the jump button. So now let's see if that's the case. Yep. So and now I get double jump. Okay. So right now, whoa. So that's interesting. So right now, I said I have this set to 2. And it seemed like I was jumping multiple times. And so that would probably stem from so in this line, this maximum jump, it's probably the way to get around. So maximum. So in here, so it starts off at 0. And so if we jump, it should go up to 1. And if I press this again, it goes to 2. But then it should stop at that point. So this is 2 and this is 2, and that should be false. So why does it seem like it's doing 3 jumps as opposed to 2?
Because you have that jump counter thing twice.
Let's see. So it's not registering it on the first jump.
See how you have it as increment or jump counter and then increment or jump counter? You have 2 of them. Do you need to have 2 of them? Right between the rich body, you have one above it, one below it.
Yes. And so the reason being is that because we're registering this as a jump, and so I want to increment that by 1.
And then, okay, I get it now.
So M grounded. Let's see. Just gonna make sure I saved it. No, I didn't rebuild, so it was set like that. So that's interesting. So I don't know. Let's see. So M grounded and jump. So another thing that you can do, so the other way you can debug, so like I said, you can set that debug value. Another way you can do debugging is in your script. And so what we can do is we can, whenever the jump count gets incremented, we can write that out so that we can see for ourselves. And so the way that you can do that is if you say debug.log. And so what that's going to do is it's going to write a message to the console. So yeah, the console down here. So I'm going to write, I'm going to say jump count. And then the way you concatenate, so if I put that plus, what it's saying is I want to concatenate these 2 things together. So I want to say jump count. I want to have it write jump count, and then I want it to write the value here. So let's save that. I'm going to do it here. So I really just want, so I'm just putting a debug kind of where the jump count is being incremented. So I'm going to come back to Unity. It's going to build. Okay, so now it's run. So if I press, so now it says jump count is to 1. Oh, interesting. So if let me clear this out. So I press it. So it's saying to 1. So that makes sense. Now if I press it again, you can see it still kept it at 1 and then updated it.
Because it went down and you jumped again when you were going down.
So let's see. So in the code, so it probably has to deal, so somewhere it's probably getting set to 0. So probably what's happening, I would suspect is here, is that when we jump in the fixed update, even though we're starting to jump, it's still registering it as that we're still on the ground. And so it's reading it as grounded being true and resetting the jump count back to 0. So it's like once I finally get in the air,
it recounts it back to 0.
Yeah. So, so how do we work around this? So,
I'm trying to get that.
it's probably a way.
Can you just add it to the beginning of the if so it said for them 0 initially, and then at the end of that, loop it would put 1 on it, or would that mess it up? I don't know how to do it.
So let's see. So if you come back, so are you talking about up here?
No, in the if statement asking if we're grounded and if we could jump. Set it to 0 before you do everything else, and then tell it at the end at 1. Would that work or no?
So if we're in.
As like, if you set it at line 95, so we're stuck down more, or I don't know.
Oh, I see. So, you're saying, would it, if I move jump count further up, would that?
If you set jump count equal to 0, run grounded is equal to false, run everything else, and then ran jump count plus equal 1. Would that work or no?
I have a feeling we may end up running into the same problem. And the reason being is that what I think is happening right now is in this fixed update. So this fixed update, like I said, it's being called outside of here, the actual update. So probably the easiest way to fix all of this is just to get rid of the fixed update and just move everything into. So then we can ensure that this check is happening at the same time the update is. Because probably so if we talk about kind of what was happening with update and fixed update, is that fixed update is being run on its own. Kind of fixed interval, and so because of that, this is going to run. It's going to run at different times than the actual update. So probably a way.
I'm only getting the 1 jump. I'm not getting that double jump.
So just for giggles, let's try doing this. If we just move this portion into update, and for now, I'm going to do a comment. So by using this / asterisk, what that does is, so I'm supposed to block out lines of code because I have this in here, or single line comments in there. It's going to prevent it from commenting the whole thing out. So I'm going to try. I think for now what I'll do is just remove these lines. Okay. So now we're still doing the check, so the grounded check. It's just now moved into the update with everything else. So let's see what happens when we do that. Okay. So I've built okay. Now I'm going to try running it. Let's see. So like 1, 2. Let's see. So if I click 1, that makes sense. 1, 2. Nope. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Drats. So that did not fix the way I thought it would. So the nice part is we can just undo all of what I just changed. Honestly, oh, I don't want to remove that. Redo.
Yeah, with that debug though, but I want to jump the one, not a double. With debug jump count, I can't jump an extra.
So just to verify, I'll just say reset jump. Whoops. So this will check to see whether or not we've done that. So I can say collapse to
Oh, there, I've got it right there.
That's a little bit hard to tell what's happening. So, for the sake of time, the nice part is that we have made this a public variable. So if I just reduce that by 1, and now I do have a double jump.
So we get ready to bring the maximum count jump to 1.
So,
and we have to do that whole reset jump.
You don't have to write these lines. This is just for debugging purposes. Like I said, but this should get you well on your way to getting a double jump in place. So double jump out of the two.
Why am I getting that double jump?
Double jumps are a little bit harder for run. So for running, if you want to do a run, I'll give you a hint on how to do that. So if input get button down, and you identify whatever button you want. So let's say fire 1 for right now, but it could be whatever you want. You could then just set that by your run multiplier. And so if you're moving left or right, so if you're pressing that button, it should multiply it by that value to then increase it. Likewise, if you're not pressing anything, then you have 0 multiplied by your by this value, which ends up being 0. So it won't alter it in any way. So anyway, that handles everything for assignment 2. So you can try this out with the double jump. So now you should have a little bit more experience with how to do debugging within Unity. So if things come up, you can write debug statements, or kind of go into the inspector here. I say once you're done with the debug, if you just right click and go back to normal, then it removes the private variables from being shown. But anyway, so I think that wraps up what I wanted to cover for class today. Thursday we'll talk a little bit more about game engines and kind of programming constructs, and probably answer any last minute questions that you have with regards to assignment 2.